I just thought about this. You guys have like a little monitor up on the Skype thing, so you can actually see the intro and everything else going on, can't you?
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
like
saw.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those
I
are
saw.
Patreon dollars. Those are Patreon dollars well spent,
I,
brother.
this is cool shit actually, because I wasn't able to do a lot of stuff before, so this actually works out really well in Skype. Even though I'm not a big fan of Skype, but the fact you can actually see what I'm doing in real time is kind of nice. Yay!
Yay.
Yeah, we were actually we
Yay.
were waiting for John to get here. He just showed up, so he was the kind of the guest here on this little round table because he wanted to have a discussion.
Apparently there's an echo, Steve. Apparently there's an echo,
I'll
Steve.
fix that 1 second. Give me 1 second. Watch magic. Bye-bye, Echo. Bye-bye, Echo. All right, Echo should be gone now. Yay. Right? Yes, say yes. I know it is. Because what happens is if I don't mute the audio for the NDI, I get an echo. But when I mute it, it goes away. So we wanted to have a roundtable discussion on the burden of proof because John has been watching some of my videos and he has some questions on certain things. And I guess the burden of proof has been coming up recently in a lot of different groups, I guess. So we've got a couple of people in here. Obviously, we got Cheshire. And here we got Michael in here. Who else just snuck in here? Who else
Josh.
we got? Josh. Yes, Josh. We'll just call you Josh S. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. We got you in here, and I invited a bunch of people. A bunch of you popped in. So Josh popped in, Michael popped in, and well, that's about it. And we might have a special guest in a few, depending on if he finishes up certain things that he's doing on his channel. We'll see if we have a surprise guest. But anyways, let's kind of kick it off. So, John, go ahead. I mean, what's your questions on the burden of proof? Because this is going to be fun. I like this topic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I've just kind of, identified as atheist for the past few years. Honestly, most of like the nuts and bolts of what I learned, I kind of got from Atheist Experience, spent a lot of hours, watching them. And I just, I had strong impression that I told everybody that would listen that, atheism is lack of belief. And, I noticed instantly it was a lot more convenient position, because you don't assume the burden of proof. And of course it kind of includes a lot more people, pretty much everybody's an atheist that doesn't, have express an affirmative position. So, I mean, of course I liked that and I went with that for a long time. And then, I watched Non Sequitur show some and heard Steve say I heard you say I am not an atheist, say that you weren't an atheist, and that like shocked the hell out of me and honestly annoyed me. And, I'm like, kind of thinking what is, trying to figure out what perspective you were coming from. And I started watching some more of your videos and, saw that it's kind of more from academic philosophical perspective. So, I kind of wanted to know really what the academic usages of these were and how it compares to, I guess, the colloquial usage, kind of the way I've understood it and how it affects the, burden of proof, if that changes it.
Sure, and there's a lot to unpack there, so we're going to do it a little piece by piece. First of all, let me warn everybody, if they're not interested in this topic, by all means, they don't have to watch. My channel has a lot of different things on it. This is one of the things I do talk about a lot because I like philosophy, and this comes up quite a bit. So we're going to be discussing this every so often. The second thing to get out of the way is, yes, we've noticed Cheshire's hair. Praise. Yeah, it looks good. We all agree. And somebody did notice your cup.
Thank you. You guys are too sweet.
She said that nobody would notice her cup. Somebody did.
Okay, I didn't say that people wouldn't notice my cup. My roommate said, I wonder if anybody will notice or how quickly they'll notice. My roommate was like, nobody's going to be looking at your cup.
She was wrong. Yeah, why are they looking at the cup? There's other things to look at. By the way, somebody actually said they're not paying attention to anything we say as long as you're on the screen. So I'm going to hide you for a little while. Okay, so the burden of proof. So, one of the things I do explain to people is not just how these words are used in academia and philosophy, but I would also make the argument that this is how it's generally used worldwide, colloquial as well. But in the specific groups that you're talking about, the Atheist Experience, American Atheism, and Atheist Republic, they have their own stipulative versions of these words. And they've been for many, many years trying to get atheists to adopt these usages. They're allowed to do that. Okay, nothing says that they can't do that. That is a politically motivated appeal to utility. because they want to have a utilitarian type argument that if more people use the term atheist, they have more political power. That's set forth by David Silverman in Fighting God. That is nothing controversial. This is a political movement to do this. Where I explain is that they're trying to change historical uses of the word for the last 300 years and how it's used in the literature. That is a fact. Even Anthony Flew, when he wrote his paper, Presumption of Atheism in 1972, he even acknowledges atheism is the belief that God does not exist, and I want it to be the lack of belief. So even he is trying to acknowledge that this position that he has is that he wants it to be the negation, or excuse me, the negative, not the negation. So what's called negative atheism. The problem that we have with this, with the burden of proof that you're talking about, is the burden of proof is Latin, right? Or onus probandi, which basically is the burden of proof is somebody has to give reasons for their position, or in this case, it's an epistemic burden, not a legal one. This is the difference between onus probandi when we're talking about in a legal sense as far as comparative to a epistemological sense. In a court of law, the burden of proof relies on the prosecutor to show that the person is guilty, right? That's how we have our legal system set up, John, right? Okay. This is what Anthony Flew was talking about in his presumption of atheism. The reason why we have that set up that way is because there's 4 possible outcomes for any legal system. 2 of them are called judicial errors, right? One of them would be the guilty man gets convicted, which is good, right? The innocent man goes free, which is good. But the other judicial errors would be the guilty man gets convicted and the guilty man goes free. Those are considered to be judicial errors. We, as a society, as America, think one is worse than the other. We think that a man who is innocent going to jail unjustly is a worse, egregious thing to have happen than a guilty man goes free. This is how we set up our judicial system. When it comes to philosophy, there's no such necessity for these things. There's no reasons why we have an exigent circumstances to say this is why we have to have it this way. When you have a proposition, you can believe anything you want with regards to the proposition. Unless maybe some theists may argue, well, if you don't believe this, you're going to hell. They might argue some exigent circumstances, but we're not theists. So, but the burden of proof is not just somebody who has a positive position. This is where I think that this idiom gets confused. While it is true, if you have a positive position, you have a burden of proof. Anyone who has any position whatsoever has a burden of proof. And what they mean by that is a burden of justification. They're synonymous in epistemology. They're different a little bit in some advanced studies and in when it comes to like legal things, like what's called the burden of persuasion, burden of production. These are nuanced things. But for our situations, burden of proof, burden of justifications are synonymous. So all they're saying is, why do you have the position you hold? Why don't you believe? Why do you believe? What is it you believe in, and why do you believe it? That is the burden of proof to justify your position. So when you say to somebody, I don't believe you, that has an attached burden attached to it. It's just what makes it rational. Why are you rationally able to withhold assent or disaffirmation, or disaffirming what somebody says? Why, if Chess says she's real and you say I don't believe you, she's probably going to want to know why you have that particular position. You don't believe that she exists, right? Now, people may find that to be odd, but I have people that believe that I don't exist. A lot, actually, more so than you think. And it's not that they actually hold that position, but they don't want to use the word belief. They just will avoid it at all costs. But the reality is, if we're not talking about God, if we're just talking about a normal person, wouldn't it be kind of odd for you to say, I don't believe that Cheshire exists? Does that seem like a rational position to take without explaining why you have that position? That is why we have a burden of proof. Why you're rationally able to say, I don't believe Cheshire exists. She's a CGI, and he'll show you the computer code for her and stuff.
So it's really clear when you use an example like it, does someone exist? Because, everyone's going to agree that she exists. But I guess I wonder more in a situation where you didn't have any information. And, that's, I think, kind of what a weak atheist would say is they wouldn't affirm that there is no God purely because the concept of God is so poorly defined and so vacuous that you don't have enough information to be able to say, no, I'm affirming that your God does not exist until they give you more information about maybe what kind of God that is. Like, so I would say, I don't have a belief in any gods, but if someone was more specific and said, I'm a fundamentalist Christian, I believe the earth was created in 7 days, 10,000 years ago, I'd say, well, with respect to that, I do affirm that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give specific reasons, why I don't believe that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. But let me pick that apart a little bit. And I just had this conversation with Ozzy a little bit the other. We're gonna suss it out more. But I had asked him, this various thing. To me, when somebody says like I don't believe because I am not convinced, or I do not believe because I don't have enough information, that to me is not a justification. And let me explain why. It's non-informative. I can actually, using deductive reasoning, figure that out without you telling me anything. Because if you had enough reason, you would be convinced. And if you were convinced, you would believe. They're non-informative statements. They're basically just throwaway statements. I would like to know, like, when you say I don't believe, there's an actual justificatory reason. For example, let's say we'll use the old gumball thing, right? Matt's gumball thing it works in some cases like this. If I say to you that I have this gumball in front of me, quantized, so they're even or odd, and I say, hey, John, the proposition is that these gumballs are even. Well, you don't have any information either way, right?
Right.
So in this particular case, what you would say is, I don't have any information to warrant being holding the position that they're even or odd, and a guess, it would be merely a guess. It's not, you're never justified to have a guess. Therefore, I have no justification to say it's even, and I have no justification to say it's odd. I withhold my assent to either, and I'm agnostic on that proposition. Your burden of proof is now justified. You've been discharged properly. Right? Now, it's windy and wordy to say it that way, and we don't always, go through this long, elaborate justification process. But that literally is really what you're saying when you're saying, I don't believe either way. I'm agnostic on it. But I've just given you my reasons why you would be agnostic on the proposition of the gumballs, right? Because not that you have no information either way, but you would merely be making a guess, and guesses are not justified. Therefore, it is a rational position to say, I don't believe that they're even, Steve. I don't believe they're odd either, because we call that closed under negation. If you don't believe they're even, you don't believe they're even without holding they're odd, you have to believe that neither is called.
Mm-hmm.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. It's just a difference of, terminology, I guess. And, I think the reason why, and maybe it's a difference between kind of, just being conversational and how you normally use language and, kind of being really specific with academic definitions. But, someone who kind of adhered to, what I described, the colloquial definition of atheism, they would say that. So I guess I would say that if I say that I'm agnostic towards God's existence, I mean, maybe technically that's accurate, but I feel like it conveys the wrong message to the person I'm talking to, because, I have the same degree of confidence that a God doesn't exist that I have about, other supernatural creatures like
All right.
Bigfoot or
Well,
Loch Ness.
let's suss that out. Let me work with you a little bit, then we'll get to Michael.
You run into a little bit of
Go
a
ahead.
problem, right? Because you start running into that not only could the jar not exist, or the marbles, or anything outside of those things, or even you, to even address whether or not those things exist, you start getting into really hazy area. But part of the problem being that people, when you're talking about these things, and when you're talking about something like the atheist experience, and you're talking about religion, and all of that falls under philosophy, all of it. So when you start using more broad terminology, conversationally or not, you do start running into problems, and you start leading people in a direction that is functionally incorrect, and you're setting them up for failure.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, yeah.
Let me read the super chat real quick. Demonic Deravos, $5. My humanist money for a non-existent Steve. Thank you. Let's suss that out real quick. Russell Bertrand had a term called bare possibilities. And bare possibility is anything that's just not logically impossible, basically. So, yes, there's a bare possibility God exists. There's a bare possibility that we're not real. There's a bare possibility that Yeti's real. I mean, these are all bare possibilities. So I'm gonna join a little bit of inquiry with you here, because it sounds like to me you're holding onto the fact that these are bare possibilities. Therefore, you can't make a value judgment on it. You could, if you think that it is more likely the case, much more likely, a significant amount, not just within a margin of error here, but if you think that it is much more likely the case that there are no gods, you are justified to say I believe there's no gods if you can give reasons for it. Like, say I would say this. Because of the logical problem evil, evidential problem evil, divine hiddenness, divine lies paradox, more epistemological issues, and other things dealing with the historical context of what we know about deities and the fact that they are very similar to what we would see in any kind of fictional creature, such as we never actually a posteriori discovered any properties. They've already been a priori given to us by other people. I think that is much more likely the case that even if there's a bare possibility that a God exists, that there is no God. Therefore, I believe that there's no God. That is a burden of proof any atheist can say, and they meet it bar none. I would take that any day of the week as a very well thought out justificatory statement of why somebody would be an atheist and actually hold the belief that God does not exist. So do you, John, hold the belief that God does not exist, or do you really think that, you're not sure either way? Because it doesn't sound like that. It's not like you actually believe there's no gods.
Yeah, and that's true, because honestly, I think I do hold the belief that gods do not exist, but kind of, strategically,
It sounds.
like...
Why strategically?
Sorry. I want to say it sounds to me that you don't believe in any of the gods that have yet to be presented to you.
Yeah,
so
but that's
it's
fine.
It's possible that you could posit, like, you think that it's possible that somebody could present to you like such a broad definition of God that you would be like, okay, well, yeah, that exists. But as far as you're concerned, you might not consider that thing a god.
Yeah, and what the real crux is, what you run into, is the reason you don't want to say that you're affirming that a God does not exist is because the very next thing that person is going to say to you is, well, then you're claiming to have absolute knowledge.
No, I disagree. Okay, first of all, I will destroy people that do that. That's a precept nonsensical Darwin's deity type bullshit.
Never go full precept. Never go full precept.
5000 W. Any insights on George Hamilton Smith's and his claim that babies are atheists? There's a couple. He's from the 18th century, dude. By the way, so anybody from the 18th century will probably have weird statements. Some people do claim that babies are atheists. Some people claim rocks are atheists. Bionic Dance thinks rocks are atheists.
If they could just for the chat.
They do on
Raise
Atheist
the
Experience.
sun.
They say that. Oh, yeah.
If they could justify it, hey, I think it's absurd myself, right? I would argue that no, babies and are not atheists, and Dr. Oppie argues that extensively. He says that babies are innocent, they don't know of the proposition, therefore you can't assign any value whatsoever. Say they don't, you can't even get so far to say that they're an atheist or theist. And I agree with him.
If you've got a Venn diagram of atheist, theist, and then in the middle, I would say rocks aren't even in the diagram.
Yeah, I think it's
They're
absurd.
outside of the circles.
When you start watering down the term atheist to include babies and rocks, do you really want to be? Hey, what do you got in common with a rock? We're both atheists. That's kind of silly, right? But Bionic Dance does argue that, and I think it's absurd. Yeah. There are people that argue babies are atheists. I think that's absurd. I do take Graham Oppie's approach that they are innocent. They don't hold a belief, that God exists, and they don't believe that God does not exist. But the thing you said about the precept, that you're claiming knowledge, you tell them to shove it, because what you said, I believe God does not exist, or God does not exist, is a dosastic claim. It's only belief. You're not asserting anything relating to knowledge. You can take what's called a deflationary approach. And you say, I could say, I believe God does not exist. You can get rid of the I believe, and it means the same thing. God does not exist. Those two statements are equivocal.
I think
equivalent. Equivocal. I make words up as I go along. Sorry,
I think it's a little bit of an excuse to say that we don't want to have the burden of proof because we're not holding a position. Because I mean, it's you're going to have to, the person you're speaking with, you're going to have to define your terms anyway.
Yes.
You're going to have to understand what they mean by God anyway. So if their definition is so broad that you're like, well, okay, then you don't have to address that anyway. And if they are talking about a specific God, it's not really that difficult to take, like, I don't know, pick a God and be like, well, here's why I don't believe it, because there's a really good chance you already have reasons why you don't believe in that God.
Agreed.
So there's not really any reason to take this position, because if you're worried that somebody's going to present this obscure thing that you can't possibly, like, you go full solipsism, then you don't have to address that in particular. You could say, well, you know what, I don't have enough information about that. I'm not going to make a decision right now unless you can present to me more information. But that still means that you don't have to be afraid of holding a burden of proof about the gods that you're dealing with on a regular basis.
Yeah,
the believers that you're dealing with.
And why wouldn't you want to have a burden of proof? This is what I can't understand from some of these atheists.
I don't know how you're going to. How
why
are
would you
you
not
going
want to have one?
Help how do you want to help other people understand your position if you just refuse to engage with them
Right.
and constantly tell them, well, it's not up to me?
Yeah,
So-
or real quick, why would you say, hey, theist, I don't believe you, but I'm not going to give you reasons why I don't believe you? Those
Okay.
reasons why you don't believe them are your burden of proof.
Well, no, nobody does that. Nobody says I'm not, it's your burden of proof and I'm not going to give you
Yes,
any
they do.
reasons.
Oh, yes, they do. I've
Yeah,
ran into
actually,
many of
I
them.
could jump in here.
Yeah,
for
go
a
ahead,
sec-
please, Michael.
for a second. Yeah,
Yeah, come
actually, lots of people do that,
Mhm.
and I was one of them. Steve and I first interacted after he put out his paper on the atheist burden of proof, and I read it the first time, and I crumpled it up. Hey, you're full of shit, Steve.
The best
and then
way
I
to read a
actually,
paper.
and then I opened it up again, and I actually read it, and then we had a discussion about it, and I was one of those, and there was a very specific reason why I wanted to say I'm not convinced. You have the burden of proof. Show me, show me, show me. And the reason why I did it personally, I won't speak for anybody else in the community. The reason why I did it was because it was kind of fun to watch them sit there and squirm because they knew they didn't have any evidence. But I came to realize, after, for lack of a better term, kind of Steve's intervention in this paper, which is good, and I've talked about it a lot. We talked about it on the podcast, and that it's really useful because you can. It's such an easy burden to discharge if you actually take 5 minutes and look at it, and you can say, well, I don't believe there's a God. Why not? And what Steve alluded to a second ago is, all the maybe philosophical ways, and I'll just say, fossil record, biological, chemical, all these other things from the physical sciences point of view, and say none of these things exist. That's why I don't accept your claim. And in the same way, it discharges the burden in 2 minutes, and you need to throw it back at them. And it's not as, I think what I was doing before, and I think what some atheists do is a little bit lazy.
Yeah.
In saying, oh well, you do all the work and prove it to me, and I'll just sit here and say, nah, not convinced, nah, not convinced. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's a little bit lazy, and I was guilty of it as well. And now I don't take that stance anymore. I take I'm at the point now where even personally, I'm almost at the point where I'm prepared to say I believe no gods exist. I'm not quite there yet.
I think you can. I think you look. I think that you probably you do believe that, and I think you are justified, and I think you can make a good argument for it. But have you noticed that when you do engage with theists taking the approach that I do, you have a much stronger case?
Oh yeah, without question, because from the theist perspective, they think you're just dancing around.
Right.
Like so when you say I'm not convinced, a lot of the interactions
There's no
have
point
been,
in engaging with you anymore if you say
Well,
that.
So I would
Exactly.
never just say I'm not convinced. And what it goes back to, well, for me, what it always went back to is, what I said earlier is that I felt like if I ever did make a positive, so I would always give my reasons why I, wasn't. For me, I would say I would give reasons why I wasn't convinced, but it would always go back to if I was making a positive assertion that I was claiming absolute knowledge, and they were asserting an unfalsifiable position.
Why does it get to knowledge, though? Where does the absolute knowledge come from? That's just absurd. No,
Yeah.
just say I believe something has nothing to do with absolute knowledge. I believe is like the basic of just being convinced. Then you have stronger convictions. So you have a weak
Well,
conviction,
yeah, that's the
stronger
that's the-
conviction, knowledge, and epistemic certainty. Belief is the lowest rung.
That's the opposite argument, or the flip coin argument of, well, do you possibly know everything? Then how do you know God doesn't exist?
Right. Yeah.
It's the same argument. It's just flipped the other way.
And I do
Yeah.
think it's more honest to say, I believe that no gods exist, because that really is what I believe. But so I guess I wonder, well, Steve, you say that you're not an atheist. So I mean, do you think that the amount of evidence on either side is equal to to not feel comfortable affirming that God doesn't exist?
I don't think it's equal, but Dapper Dino $5. If there was some God, in what way would you expect reality to differ from a situation in which there is a God besides the existence of said God? Who knows? Unless you know the properties of the deity, you would have no way of answering that question, right? You would have to. I mean, if I say a deity exists, like the one in the Bible, as opposed to one that doesn't, I could make the argument what I would expect to see miracles every so often. I would expect to see things that are just beyond the norm. I would expect to see, the things that the Bible posits. I don't see any of those things, right? But as far as though I think that the equal evidence, no, I do tend more on is probably more likely the case that what we would perceive to be a God doesn't exist. I think there's something beyond our ability to understand. I think there has to be some base level of reality What that is, I can't even begin to say it. It might be an actual conscious entity. I don't know. It's sure feasible.
It definitely goes into the I don't know territory.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people will why it makes sense for a lot of people to take the agnostic
right.
approach, because you can't, there's a limit to how much you could possibly know.
And just remember, I don't know is an ordinary doubt expression. It's not saying anything about epistemological knowledge. If I just say I don't know, this means I don't know how to answer the question. A direct answer to a direct question would be, does God exist? Yes, theist, no, atheist. Right? I mean, anybody would agree with that, I think. If you say yes, you would be a theist to that question. If you say no, you're definitely an atheist. What else are you going to call that? But I would say I don't know how to answer that question with a direct answer. I can't say yes, I can't say no.
Is it because the concept of God is so poorly defined, and then you would say you are an atheist if someone defined the God more clearly?
No, I don't think the concept of God is poorly defined. I think that when we hear the word God, we all have something that comes to mind. When an atheist tries to run the narrative that, oh, well, God, the concepts are not defined or meaningless, then why are they spending 8 hours a day on the internet talking about a concept that's meaningless to them? I think that for 2,000 years plus, maybe longer, 4,000, 8,000 years, whatever, how many years we've had gods around, the Christian God for 2,000 years, or at least the actual Christian, before that, the Old Testament version of Yahweh. But these concepts have been around for a very long while. And so if somebody doesn't understand the concepts, then I don't know why they're even engaging in the conversation at that point.
I mean, I agree with you, but I got that from what you were just saying. Because when I just asked you, then you said, well, because I don't know, there could be a conscious being at the foundation of reality or the universe. And to me, that sounds like that's where you're going. You're saying, well, because...
Yeah, not necessarily. I think that it's reasonably to assume for some people that there might be a conscious being that they call God. I base it on personal experience, though. I don't base it upon evidential things that I can show other people. And I know a lot of people might argue against that. And I think it's a reasonable argument to be had either way. Because if you accept personal subjectivity, then you have to accept other people's personal subjectivity. However, I disagree a little bit on that, because I only have to accept my own, because I'm the only one who has that qualia. Right? You can't experience my qualia.
Yeah, so I would have asked, what is the reason that you would have to believe that, what reason would you have to think that there would be a conscious being? But you said because you had a personal experience. I've
had experiences I just cannot naturally still to this day come to an explanation. Now that's not a God of the gaps. It is still in that realm of possibility, and not a bare possibility, that there might be something of a deification of something out there. If it is, it's probably not anything that we would ever expect, and certainly not the young earth creationist God, and is probably not even what we would expect of the God of the Bible, because there's a lot of problems there, right? But we're talking about like simulation theory, right? People have talked about that. If a civilization was so advanced to have us as a simulation, to me is equivalent to a God, because they can prescriptively change the laws of the universe. So I'd rather be true to myself and say I'm agnostic on the proposition, rather than come out and say, look, I believe this or believe that, because I don't have a belief either way. But I do believe things like aliens exist. I believe that. I can justify that. Right?
Yeah. So I guess, I agree. I mean, I agree with your position. I feel like it's, mostly with what I identify with, but the major difference is, the point is, you're saying that's what an agnostic is, not what an atheist is.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to convert anybody in any particular position, right? Dapper Dino, $5. I spent hours talking about creationist kinds, but I'm pretty sure that's a meaningless term. It is, right? Species equals kind is rather meaningless. This is what happens when I see people say an atheist equals non-theist. They are not the same terms. They have what's called intentionality issues. You cannot replace one term for another without a propositional value changing. So when people say that atheism and non-theism are identical, I think they're making a huge mistake, because in logic that would not work. I can make an argument that I can give a proposition such as atheist. If you Paul Draper writes in Stanford Encyclopedia, something along the lines of atheism is the belief that God does not exist. We'll just go with that. Now, if you change that to non-theist, the value of that proposition has changed, because now it reads non-theist believe that God does not exist, and that's not necessarily the case, right? Some non-theists do, some non-theists don't. Those words, non-theist and atheist, mean different things in philosophy for a reason. Because if I say atheists believe that God does not exist, which is a true statement in philosophy, right? If I change that to non-theist, now that becomes a false statement. That's called intentionality. That if you change one thing to another that has coextensive traits, that the propositional value will change. And I don't think that people in the atheist experience and the atheist communities look that far into these things to really suss those things out, because that's a problem when it comes to philosophy, to have an intentionality issue. It really is.
So how are they wrong then?
It's not that they're wrong. Okay, they're only wrong when they're saying that I'm wrong. Okay, they're allowed. They're allowed.
Yeah,
I
so
love
there's-
that. I agree.
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah.
The thing is that Steve's not as, even though it comes across as if it's a semantic argument, it's not. What he's trying to do is be more accurate and help people understand something that they're kind of misrepresenting.
Right.
They're not always misrepresenting it, but when they go on and, like, particularly with the Atheist Experience, when they go on and a caller calls in and starts talking about philosophy, and then they tell that person they're wrong
Thank
when
you.
they aren't, that's
Which he's
when it
done, which they've
becomes a
done.
problem. So his
Yeah.
contention
Oh, yeah,
isn't
yeah.
the definitions they're using. His contention is that they're telling people that they're incorrect when they aren't, and they're misleading people by doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
That's
don't think they're
brilliant.
doing it on
impose the
purpose.
Thank you.
definition on other people.
And they did that the other day.
Well-
I wrote a blog on that. Matt Dillahunty told a person on his word for disbelief was wrong. And I'm like, no, the person's using disbelief as I would be used in college for an epistemic
Right.
status. That to me is agenda. If you're telling people what they would learn in college is wrong because you have an agenda, you're no longer in the realm of academic.
And the thing is that when you're on
honesty.
a show, you've got a lot of people watching that show. So it's not just that they're telling an individual that they're wrong. They're continuously telling lots of people who might not be as educated as this person who went to college. So now all those people have it wrong. And and it'd be one thing if they were like, oh, those aren't the definitions we're using here. Here's what we are going to use. That would be fine. There would be
Right.
no problem. I don't think Steve would have a problem with that at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
No, they're allowed to have their definitions, right? I'm not. People have that think, but first of all, this is not a definitional argument. Anybody who says this about definition or semantics is not at the level to have this discussion. They're not understanding the nuances of this. It's not about definitions. What's about is the proper understanding of how you would read these things in literature, how it would work in logic, and the fact that when you're telling a caller they're wrong when they're using a word appropriately and what they would learn in college, that to me gets my goat, and that's just what they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, I get that. I guess, it's just so. Yeah, I guess the bad part is telling people that they're wrong when they're using those terms. But I mean, I feel like in normal everyday conversations that you have with 99% of people, if you tell them you're agnostic, you're going to give them the wrong, or at least me. If I told someone I was agnostic, maybe that would be
Well, you would
accurate
have
academically.
you'd have to explain it more.
Yeah.
And like when you've got a show that has like time constraints, there's nothing wrong with taking your show and saying, listen, here at this show, we are already always using these definitions. So then anybody who's
Right.
calling in already understands what's going on. There doesn't have to be a contention here, like
Right.
at all. It's only.
But I won't call into their
because
show
they're
for that reason, right? I'm not going to use their definitions, but they're not going to call in mine either, right?
Well, which is fine, and you don't have to. But the same thing, they can't go around and like shit talk the definitions of all of
Sure.
philosophy when they're talking about philosophy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
agree.
problem.
You hand $5. Real question: how would you justify aliens? Just a quick version. Legitimately curious. I would use the Drake equation, and the Drake equation is more probabilistic given what we know about habitable regions and how many planets there are. That if you just take the most minimalistic parameters, that there probably is intelligent life out there. I would use the Drake equation for that. And thank you, a picture perfect for the dollar. Sokka, you dropped in real quick. Is that you?
Yeah, hey, what's up? How you
Hey,
doing?
buddy. Do we want to get to you real
All
quick?
right, Socks here. Time to fight.
Yeah. Now the
Now
gloves
that
come
my hair
off.
clip.
Yeah.
Or
I'm just kidding.
just real quick.
Somebody hold my earrings. Cheshire's in the room.
Does Josh want to say something? I know Josh is on a time schedule here and he's been awfully quiet. Just want to add.
Yeah, I'm about to have to leave anyway. No, I was just kind of wanting to sit in and listen to everything that was going on, and that's why I told you before I came in, just in case I can step out.
No worries. Yeah, no, it's fine. I like when people just sit and listen too. My unfinished journey, $5. Big, sturdy, strong atheist, not a puny, weak, woosy atheist. There you go. Hey, I'm all for that, right? It's so funny that people think that I'm somehow splitting the atheist community, but I got to tell you, I do believe that I've created more stronger atheists than most people. And I'm not saying as opposed to like the American Atheist or those groups. Those guys create a lot of atheists. They've been around a very long time. But I think I've done my share in not only changing people to atheism, but actually making them stronger atheism. So
That's part of the problem with misrepresenting Steve's argument.
Yeah.
That's the other problem. The other problem is there's a whole lot of people misrepresenting what Steve's actually saying because either one, they think it's a semantic argument because they don't understand the topic and they don't understand the contention. And the second one is communication issues of like just being able to understand like the way Steve goes about saying things versus the way Dillahunty goes about saying things. Not that either of them are wrong in the way they're communicating, they just communicate differently. And so it's when you do stuff like that, especially when you do stuff over texts and over online things where they're always like they're months away from each other when they're posting these blogs, you start, it's really easy to run into problems along those lines.
And he's never asked me.
It would have been so much easier if it would have been possible to get them in a room and actually just have this discussion. And it's not like neither of them are public figures. It's not like one of them's like, oh no, I don't actually go out and debate. Like, that's ridiculous.
He's never asked me to clarify. Everything the last 4 or 5 things he said about me were just completely wrong. And I'm like, where are you getting this from? And then other people parrot that. They hear Matt say it.
I don't even necessarily disagree with them. It's just that like the way this is communicated and the way this is like there's a whole lot of people just not understanding what the contention is, and nobody's like Matt or Aaron or whoever aren't doing, they're using that to their advantage in this discussion or this contention because they're not correcting them in what Steve's position is, which leads me to believe at best they don't understand what his contention actually is, which is another entirely different problem. But I respect these people and I want to think the best of them, which makes me think that they just don't care, which is kind of a problem.
Yeah, and they're agenda driven.
Especially if they're going to start shit.
Yeah, I respect them too. So
I definitely noticed that, and that's really what drove me, here to the channel, is that, I started noticing Atheist Experience seemed like it was, kind of getting a lot more preachy and, less about skeptical, discussions. And then you start getting into, they start pushing kind of liberal ideology, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but I just felt like it was really out of place. And then the first time...
It's the Atheist Experience, not the liberal experience.
Yeah, it's not Atheism plus.
Politics shouldn't really have anything to do with what the experience of atheists are.
I would totally agree.
I don't necessarily...
the cause.
Yeah, I don't necessarily even disagree.
Don't they still host their blogs on Free Thought Blogs?
Yeah, but let's between you and I, what are so free about free thought blogs? That is not a free thought blog.
Right, no, but I'm just saying, like that's also like the home of Atheism Plus.
Yes.
Like
Matt Dillahunty started that stuff, then he got kicked out of his own group. They removed him because he was on a different account. They removed that account not knowing it was him. He came back on his real account. They still removed his real account then. There was a big flap about that. Remember back in the day? He got kicked off of his own group, but maybe not being Atheist Plus enough. Kawasa, $5,000 W. Maybe it would be better to be brutally honest and tell ACA that their method doesn't help the political cause but harms it. I've said that. I think that it shoots themselves in the foot. Now, they might have a Machiavellian approach to the end justify the means. I don't know, but I see the damage that it causes. Because if you're going to take real quick, if you're going to take the epistemic high road, if you're going to say, look, we're the rational thinkers, right? We're theists, they're not rational, but we're rational. And then they go out and do irrational things by saying that I'm wrong when I'm clearly not, and I could actually document my stuff. That doesn't help their cause. And atheists look at that and go, wait a minute here. Guys, what Steve's saying is clearly true. Here's the logic. I understand the logic. Logic's right. Here's the a billion references. What's the deal here? And that, I think, shoots a lot of the things that they put out in the foot. They should be saying this. Well, sure, Steve is right from his perspective and from academia. We don't go by academic. We're going by our own personal things.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, there's
one of the hard things. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. And then...
I think one of the hard things too is that we're talking about somebody like with Steve, for example, here, who's not a difficult person to speak to.
You don't see me on Twitter.
Like that's we're talking about this.
Yeah,
Steve,
wait,
right?
me?
Yeah. No,
okay.
I didn't find you difficult.
I love being on your podcast. That was great.
But it was interesting because it's when you see kind of the banter that goes back and forth between some of the people who have gotten involved in this kind of thing, and Steve, you I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's like if you were able to just sit down, like some kind of mediated discussion, whatever, just sit down and have an intelligent and open conversation about this thing, because nothing that anyone is saying, depending on the point they're coming from, like if the ACA, Aaron, Matt, whatever, they're coming from a particular standpoint, and you're coming from a different standpoint, then you can just agree to disagree. And you've said very openly that however people choose to identify, that's how you'll recognize them. If someone says they're an atheist, I'll call them an atheist. Someone says they're an agnostic, I'll call them an agnostic. There's no harm being done there. One of the points that's really frustrating for me is the schisms that I've seen this cause.
Isn't that weird?
And one of the fears that I have is with the Christians, particularly the kind of the hardcore fundamentalist Christians, kind of reveling in this and still being able to move their agenda forward, while we're fighting amongst ourselves about something that could just be settled with a, well, I'm coming at it from this point, well, I'm coming at this point. We still think the fundamentalists are fucking crazy, so let's focus on them.
No, I think that's a good point. I think you're right on that.
I can be really controversial about this.
All right, one second. Let me read this first, then Chess will go, and then Sock, you have the floor. NFIB Jesus, $20. Thank you, NFIB Jesus. By the way, NFIB sucks. You guys, they're all assholes. Can't stand them.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I hope they all go down. I am on board with the whole pumpkin thing. I support Jimmy and all the rest of them. Shannon, go after the NFIB, shut them down, get rid of their PayPals. They're despicable people. It's not freedom of speech. They're just horrible, horrible people. Talking snakes, magic trees.
Not freedom of speech.
It's not freedom. They're not freedom of speech. They're a hate group. That's not freedom of speech. I am a free speech advocate. I'm a free speech advocate, but when you're advocating to go out and commit violence, that's not free speech. Talking donkeys, talking burning bushes, talking clouds, etc. The Bible is so mockable and rather fun to mock. Is that so wrong? Shouldn't we enjoy ourselves too? I think mockery is fine in some cases. I mock young Earth creationism, but when we're talking about like the outside of the young Earth creationism, outside of the flat Earth stuff, theists take these things very seriously, and mocking them is not going to be the way to go about it, because I think that all it does is have the entrenchment effect, right? So I think mockery is fine in some cases, but when you're a devout believer, like for example, like a talking snake, they're devout about that. Mocking it not going to do any. It doesn't serve any purpose, right? Do I think there's a talking snake? No. I think that if there was, it wasn't for some reason a snake. It was something else. But I don't think that story ever happened. I don't believe Adam and Eve ever happened. Go, HS, then Sokka's got the floor.
So I'll preface this with being, I don't think this is necessarily on purpose. I absolutely don't think it's malicious, and I don't necessarily think it's manipulative. But there's a handful of factors that are all kind of that the Atheist Experience and the ACA are utilizing, whether they know they're utilizing them or not. They've got people calling in that are coming from incredibly dogmatic systems, and they're not correcting that type of thinking. These people are still dogmatic. And what they're telling them over and over again is, oh, well, we don't have the burden of proof. Oh, well, we don't have the burden of proof. And they don't really justify why they don't. They just say, oh, well, no, you're making the claim, so you have to prove it to us, when they are also still making a claim. And what they do is they try and shit on Steve without actually addressing what Steve is saying. Like, if they honestly addressed what Steve was saying and was like, well, no, we're doing this, this, and this, and that's how we're going to do it, and that's fine, he's not wrong. Because in philosophy, sometimes you can have two things that are, neither of them are incorrect. You could have, like, totally different points and still both be correct. Or not correct, or not know. But they're taking these people who are already coming from a dogmatic place and just moving them to another dogma, into a political sphere, into a array of influence, so that way they can affect the political sphere, which I don't necessarily disagree with the goal of taking religion out of politics. But if you replace it with your own dogma, you run into the exact same problem. I don't agree with the method. You want to have people who are atheistic, you want to have people who are skeptical, you want to have people who are intelligent and know how to formulate proper arguments. That will help you more in the long run. It's a quality versus quantity issue.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And somebody had said that the ACA had given reasons why they don't burn a proof. I disagree. I don't think they ever have justified it. I think in fact, they'll just say, well, Steve's wrong. Atheists don't burn a proof. They
preach it. They don't justify it.
And by the way, I think it's kind of interesting that Dr. Richard Carrier, who's I consider to be a friend, he wrote a blog on this, and he even said, yeah, Steve's right. Atheists have a burden of proof. But he will go one step further that I disagree with him on. He thinks that it's like a scientific theory and that the burden has already been met, not realizing that from an epistemological point of view, You cannot rely on that. You have to, even if that was the case, even like this, the scientific theory, it's the burden has been met. Yes, that it is the case, but I still have to rationalize why I believe the scientific theory is true, right? I still have to have an understanding of it. I'm not going to have blind faith and say, well, because the scientists say it's true, therefore it's true. Now I could, and probably it might meet the criteria, but for me personally, I'm going to give reasons why I think the scientific theories are correct, right? I mean, that's just, it's a good dialectic point to make to somebody why you hold a position. That's all.
These people are also going from, are now isolated. The people who are coming out are
Right.
isolated. They're going from an in-group to being completely ostracized from their families in a lot of cases and from their church groups. They don't have that community anymore. So they're essentially taking advantage of those people by being like, well, here's a new community and here's our dogma. And people are more willing to accept that dogma because they're so used to dogmatic thinking.
I think so.
Now, again, I don't think this is necessarily malicious. I don't think it's even necessarily on purpose. It's just the order of events.
All right, Saka, floor's all yours.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that the entire move by the ACA and the Atheist Experience is done tactfully. I don't think that it's necessary like a huge political movement. I don't think that it's done with malicious intent. I think first off, like the first thing we need to understand is just the format that is being presented when you watch something like the Atheist Experience, is that they're trying to get theistic callers to come in there, or theist callers to call in there to either talk about atheism, talk about like well, as an atheist, how would do you deal with like this? How do you deal with many of the different different little things, aspects of life that religious ideology believes that they have a solution for. And that was kind of like the idea of the Atheist Experience originally. It's like, ask an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always necessarily about arguing for atheism. And I think that's a point that needs to bring out there, is because when you're arguing for atheism, you're engaging in a type of counter apologetics that not every single person is skilled to handle. Some people can engage in counter apologetics pretty easily. I think Matt and Aaron do decent jobs at that in their own kind of personal fields of study, but not every single person in the Atheist Experience can do that. But instead, when people call in to the Atheist Experience, if they're not going to be asking direct questions about just atheism and living as an atheist, there's like two other calls that they're going to get, which is the prove God doesn't exist, or they can sit back and listen to other people's arguments for why they believe God exists. And so, like, I think that maybe probably a lot of them do recognize. And Matt Dillahunty did a video on this a while back, where he actually did break down, the two common usages of the term atheist, from the propositional sense and from the psychological sense of the use of the word. And it kind of explains a little bit about that, especially when it comes to something like the Atheist Experience, that they don't want every single person to call in and just simply be, well, prove to me that God doesn't exist. So they I think that like I said, it's a tactful maneuver where they take like the broadest understanding of the term atheist and says, listen, at this point in time, I lack a belief in God. Okay, I have a psychological state where I do not believe that the claim God exists. It's just not the belief that I have. Okay, can you change my mind? And then they go out and they try to expose that there's not a lot of good arguments that people would present for their religious belief, or that especially a lot of the callers that do call into the Atheist Experience are, again, not really the best apologists out there.
G-Man calls in.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, with the exception of the bestest debater,
because G-Man always wins.
G-Man does. G-Man, it's a well-known fact. G-Man has never lost a debate.
Never.
Yeah, but so a lot of it just comes down to trying to expose the fallacious reasoning of some of the theistic arguments that people maintain, people hold on to for their religious beliefs, and so. To say that it's like this ideological movement or this political movement, I don't think that's actually the intent.
They say that that's what they're doing.
No, I wouldn't have a problem with what you just said. I think that's
I don't have a problem.
That's
with
what
that
they should do. I'm not against what they do, but when they're off of the Atheist Experience, for example, if they come into my channel and they still say that I'm wrong. Aaron wrote a blog how wrong I was, and he got everything wrong. That had nothing to do with the show of the Atheist Experience. It had nothing to do with American Atheist. His blog, and you read it, didn't you, Saka?
Yeah.
Was there anything that he got right in that entire blog, or was it just I mean, I would have given that an F in any philosophy class. It was so wrong from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think that like so Aaron Ra, like I don't really associate him like highly with the ACA. Like
Well, he's a
he
regional
has
director.
well,
Yeah.
Not
he's
the
been featured
ACA,
on
he's
this.
with
American
AA,
Atheist.
right?
He's a regional director of
He's
American
not-
Atheist,
yeah.
but he's been
Right.
obviously on the American
Yeah,
Atheist
he's
Experience
been on there, but
Yeah.
I think like a hand, maybe I don't know. I would say less than a half dozen times. I don't know. I used to watch the show a lot. I don't really watch it that much anymore.
I would agree with everything that Sokka is saying up until you say that, one, they're not political, because they say that.
Oh, they're political. Sokka
And
It's
knows they're
changed
political.
a lot.
well,
Yeah, I think that there's
and
kind of like
two-
a little.
Wait,
little
Sokka knows they're
nuance.
political.
Yeah, there's a little kind of a nuanced position in there where it's just like that. Like obviously there is a political with any group out there. Yeah, obviously like wanting to be represented more within the political spectrum. Like that does exist, but the when we talk about political, like for example, and Steve knows this, is like American Atheist. When they put it on their page that they're just going to amalgamate all agnostics under their banner so that they have strength in numbers. That's a political. That's a political
Yeah,
motivation.
it assumes
Absolutely,
that,
yeah.
yep. Mhm.
Right. But like that's so I would, if you want to say that
I don't
American
even care
Atheists,
if they do
no,
that. That's
I do.
still fine. I only care. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it can ostracize people, so it hurts them in the long run.
Sure.
But if they want to do it, fine. The problem is when they tell other people they're wrong. That's
Yeah,
when they
and
are
I'm
wrong.
not a member
That's
of the ACA.
contention.
I'm not a member of the ACA. I'm not a member of the AA. I'm not a member of AR for those very reasons. I don't like what they put out. I think that they have a very basal understanding of things. So I don't have. Why am I obligated to go by their prescript? And by this funny way, Matt loves to call me prescriptivist. He loves to say I'm prescript. I don't get that. I'm not arguing prescriptivism. First of all, that prescriptivism and moral ontology is completely something different. But I don't argue that these words have prescriptive uses. I do think that some things are a little bit more prescriptive than others. Like, for example, I would take a encyclopedia of philosophy over a colloquial dictionary. But the colloquial dictionary is definitely descriptive, no matter how you look at it. These are descriptive things. But they're the ones making it prescriptive. They're the ones saying atheism and agnosticism,
Without
two sides of the same coin kind of thing. It's like, no,
without
they're
being
not.
clear. Without being clear about what they're doing, they're doing the equivalent of calling a theory just a theory.
Well, with that, like I said, like one of the things that it's just a weird kind of things that's going to happen is this idea that the atheist community of Austin, okay, remember, I think a local atheist group from Austin, that has hit kind of like an international stage, just with things like the Atheist Experience, which is kind of funny because at the end of the day, this is a small local group from Austin, okay. That has amazingly huge international support for
They
for
do
some
well
reason.
for what they do in certain things.
Yeah,
They
and
got
so like
charisma.
yeah. So and any like I don't think that so like I said, we go back to political motivations. They are a political group, in the sense that they are obviously interested in local as well as regional, national politics there. But not to the same sense that as an activist group, purposely trying to label people or try to bring people under those. Like I said, like Matt Dillahunty, I think he does clarify that he does understand both uses of the words, and then there's the one that
I
has
think he does.
utility for the there's the one for the utility of the show.
But why does he
that
say I'm
they
wrong
do.
if he understands both, though? Which I think he does.
Well,
but
I think that
it makes it even worse when he
comes-
says I'm wrong.
I think that they're like when people say that you're wrong, there's people that just don't know the argument. If anybody says that you're wrong about anything that you state regarding the definitions, they have no idea what they're talking about. Like when it comes to talking about the definition of atheism, like
Well,
way
not
that
necessarily the
you present it.
definition, but the logic and how the words are used. I'm pretty spot on, correct? He got there's a crying baby in the background. Sokka? I think he had to go.
Sorry,
Oh,
Kid
that's
Agnew
right.
there for a
Yeah,
second.
so it's one of the uses in the logic. You never see any expert calling me out on my logic or my citations.
no, of course
ever.
not.
Not one.
I think that the only time that I think you'll get there's this one idea that people put out or that you've said before, which talks about like the utility of the words, and I agree with you that if we want to be clear and concise with the definitions that we do use, that we should use the definitions that are kind of accepted within things like the SEP. But I think that you're wrong is that when it comes to describing the other positions as having no utility at all. And
No,
I think
nobody
that's
said
I don't
that.
say that.
Yeah,
I've never
nobody
said
said that. Okay.
I say
this
they
is
do
where-
have
that's,
utility.
that's absolutely right.
Saka,
Yeah.
we're
No,
running
it's-
we're running into the problem again where this isn't the contention.
Yeah, I've never said
The
that.
contention is that they're telling people they're incorrect and misleading
Right.
people and misrepresenting Steve's argument constantly. If you're going to take a side in this, or if you're going to please address the contention. Nobody's saying that.
Yeah, I think it has utility the way they do it, but I think it actually, in the long run, I think hurts the organizations. But they clearly, for political reasons, I get it. I just don't think it's a good idea. But this is opinion based. That's not fact based.
It definitely creates like a big blind spot, like a soft, weak underbelly, and I mean you will notice it instantly when I noticed.
And theists will attack
instantly.
that.
Yeah, because you watch Aaron Ra, and I mean he knows everything about whatever paleontology, phylogeny, and he'll just destroy any young Earth creationists about it. But then you watch him. I just watched Modern Day Debate. He just had a debate with a philosopher, and I can't remember his name now, but. You see him get on with these philosophers, and he just gets destroyed. And it's like he doesn't even know he's getting destroyed, and he doesn't even know what they're talking about.
I've seen it happen firsthand. I've lived it. I know.
And then they project onto Steve that he's dividing the community.
Yeah, and it's painful to watch because it's like he doesn't learn the first time, and he just keeps chugging and powering through it.
Well,
and
he's hurting his own credibility.
Mistake. Yeah,
Well, I can
it
tell you
makes
right
us
now, I have
think.
my ears to the ground, and I know a lot of philosophical people, quite a bit, big names, and we talk off air a lot. I can tell you this without divulging anything: I've never had one of them tell me that they think Aaron knows anything about philosophy. Not one. Not one.
Well, I
It's
don't
just
know
quite
anything
the
about
opposite.
philosophy, and it's obvious to someone who doesn't know anything about it. He's out of his element there, and so I imagine as someone who's competent in the field, it's
So
painful.
why does he feel like he can write a blog about me and get everything that so many things wrong was incredible. I was just blown away.
Come on, we found out that wasn't about you. It was about Chris. Remember?
That's right. It was about Chris. We're gonna go with that. It was about stock account. Yeah. But I'm just blown away. Oh, well, no, we were kidding because the other night we had a hangout and somebody goes, "What if that blog wasn't about you? It was about biblical history skeptics." And I was like, "Oh, that would have been interesting. What a twist!
What they twist?
What they twist!" Yeah, Aaron says philosophy bores him, yet he wants to pontificate on it. It's like, Aaron, I sat there for 3 days trying to explain to him about epistemic statuses and the word disbelief, right, and how it's actually used. He's coming back to me from an 1829 Webster dictionary, which he wasn't reading correctly. People are watching this whole thing transpire, laughing their ass off, going, "Is he this dense?" And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if you go on to learn chemistry, you go to a chemist, right? If you want to go to learn biology, you go to biology. When you want to learn philosophy, why would you not learn it from a philosopher? That's how I learn about philosophy. I go to the people that know what they're talking about, right? So why does he all of a sudden want to argue for 3 days about, how a word is used in the literature when he doesn't understand the basic logic? He was convinced that if I do not believe P, or I not B, not P, which is I do not believe not P, or I don't believe the proposition is false. He thought that was a double negation. And I'm like trying to explain to him, and other people are like, "All right, no, double negation is not P, meaning P, right?"
I'll be right back because I gotta pee.
So if you have two nots right next to each other, not, that's a double negation. If you have two nots, one in the predicate, one in the propositional content, that is not a double negation. And yet he was convinced of this. And we had people that knew logic explaining him this. And I'm like, this is where you zip it and you listen to the people that are actual logicians, because they know what they're talking about. You don't argue with them. You go, okay, maybe I have an epistemic malfunction here. Maybe there's something about this particular topic I'm not getting correct when I have multiple people that know logic telling me I'm wrong on this. If I had 10 mathematicians telling me, "Steve, you're off on this math," I'm going to take pause and go, okay, where's my problem here, right? But
it always happens on the same point with him too. And I even noticed this. It comes out every single time when he says fact. He says fact, and then the philosopher he's talking to says, well, no, that's not necessarily true.
Right.
A fact can be, and then they talk about something else.
Did you watch that when he had that discussion with that one philosopher that's in the foyer where he was talking about facts and things like that? He wasn't understanding any of that conversation.
And that philosopher is holding this clipboard like it's a dying baby. He's got like both arms around it.
It was Dr. John something. He was right, by the way. He was making very good arguments. And a long time ago, Aaron came me that clip and he said, "This is why I hate philosophy. People are arguing what facts are." And I watched it and I'm like, but Aaron, he's making good points to you. You should listen. And then he still uses that example. And even this day of the day, somebody sent me that same exact clip. I know, of course I've watched it. And I'm like, Aaron was clearly not understanding the difference between a category fact and an ontological fact.
Yeah, I swear to God, the first time I watched that video, and that was the first time I watched that. First time I felt like something was off, like he didn't know what he's talking about. And I didn't know philosophy, but I definitely picked up on enough to know that this guy knows what he's talking about. And Aaron's just kind of asserting a certain definition, and he's not even familiar with what this guy's referencing. So I mean, yeah, it was kind of painful to watch. And then when I watched him on Modern Day Debate with just today with the philosopher, it was like the same thing all over again. I kind of thought he'd go to school after the first video I watched.
Well,
but
as Ozzy said, real quick. Ozzy said to him, it would really behoove him to go take a basic logic course in a community college. It really would, and I think that would too. But go ahead, Saka.
I think, yeah, there's like
I don't want
the whole the whole YouTube atheist thing. Like I think not a lot of people like go out to strive to be like huge names in atheism. Like some people just get pushed into it. Right time, right place. They hit on the topics that they like, and they fall into this position where they seem to have where people, where they seem to think that they're required to be able to answer all questions, and this is a problem that a lot of people have. Is that when you get into these discussions, like the deep philosophical discussions, that if you're not fully understanding what the topic is, then then the best thing to do is just be like, yeah, I don't know. If you want to send me some literature on this, if you want me to take a look at this, I will. That's fine. But I'm not in a position right now to answer your questions. That would be the good, honest thing that people should do. But especially for people that are like huge names in atheism, they view this as a sign of defeat. That at this point in time, you don't have something to offer, and therefore you have failed. And especially this happens a lot with people that come into the field based on some big science. Whether it's astrophysics or biology or whatever. If you're coming in and talking about atheism, and especially kind of like the anti biblical viewpoint of atheism, where you seem to just be arguing against the scientific claims that are impossible in whatever scripture you're talking about, then when you are forced to transition over and start talking about philosophy, people just think that they can just that they can just jump right into this, like no problem at all, and they end up getting bludgeoned by philosophy. Because there are a lot of people out there, and a lot of people, especially a lot of Christian apologists, have used philosophy as a weapon. They weaponize certain things in philosophy. There, I mean, like you take a look at things like the precept argument. That's a good example of weaponized philosophy.
But who was it that pushed back on the precept? Or who was it that back in the day, Saka? Who are the names that really got involved and helped explain precept to people and destroy them?
In our community,
yeah, Floyd FP.
Ramses, let's see, Ozzy, Floyd.
I helped.
Yeah.
You helped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't like putting myself up on.
But you did. You were very good
label
at that.
like with those guys.
Well, no, we're not. Yeah. I'm not trying to put myself in the same category as them either.
Yeah.
But it takes a village.
If anyone wants to see Precept dismantled, go to my YouTube channel, Sock account, and look up my. It was, I think it was like one of the last videos I did. It was like Sock account versus Sky Out, the best debater ever, or something like that. And it's.
I have to watch that.
Yeah, about 15
definitely.
minutes, and he was gasping for air. And,
I remember the only good preceptor, and I might use the term good as in relative scale, but the only preceptor that actually gave me a run for my money, but I still was able to at least, I'd say, reach a neutral status, was Jimmy Stevens. Remember him?
Oh yeah, I had.
He was good.
There was
good.
Many of good off-air hangouts between me and Jimmy Stevens back when I was trying to disabuse Brojo and Antonio Fletcher of
Brojo doing precept.
Well, because they're turning into dark Dawkins sycophants.
Yeah, they still are.
And they still are. I failed because I sat in a hangout with those guys off air, and Jimmy Stevens. It was me in a hangout with 5 presuppers. And by the time I was done,
Oh, you poor soul.
oh no,
Never go.
No,
full freak.
Sokka can hold his own. He's
Oh, I
good at
believe
this.
it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
They were-
It was not fair for them, right?
Yeah, they were outmatched.
They were doing their best to try to cloud that room, like
Help
you know,
me,
it was
calling their god Darth Dawkins. Real quick, NFIB Jesus, another 20. Wow, thank you, NFIB Jesus. Still hate NFIB, but he's not with NFIB. So, Matt 275252 quote: "The Great Jerusalem Zombie Apocalypse, an astounding claim in human history, but only one anonymous guy in history devoted a single sentence to this claim." Oh no, excuse me. Yeah, but only one anonymous guy in history devotes a single sentence to this claim. Nobody else in history validates this asserted claim. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, people could argue that, and I think that's a valid argument, that a lot of shit happened and only seems to, be found in one source. At the same time of the flood, obviously, people in China are, are
But
thriving.
Josephus.
Tacitus.
Mm.
No, I mean, I'm against young creationism. I think the whole flood story is bullshit, and I will say that I know that none of that happened, only because I will make an argument that I can justify knowledge using the theories of knowledge that I use, because I'm not a skeptic when it comes to what's called epistemological skepticism, right? The fact that I can say that I know certain things are not possible, as far as like the flood, and it wasn't posited as a miracle, so you can't even say, well, God posited it as a miracle. No, this was based on something that actually physically could have happened, and it can't. And so I know that according to the laws of physics, that isn't true. I think we can have knowledge because I'm not a epistemological skeptic, so I can make knowledge claims and try to justify it. But even if people fail on that, even if they say, well, Steve, I still think you can't claim a knowledge claim, I certainly can justify it for belief. I believe very, 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 very strongly that all that is bullshit. Yes. Nothing wrong with that. And when I hear people say, well, I don't want to make any belief claims, why not? What are you scared of? I don't get it. I believe Noah's Ark was bullshit.
A lot of people don't understand what a belief claim is. Like that's the other issue there. If you have a thought in your head regarding a proposition, okay, like if you like about reality, okay, it could be something like just completely mundane, that you can represent in the sense like that. I think that my neighbor's car is. I think it's true that my neighbor's car is red. Okay, that's a belief. That's all it is. It's just any proposition about the state of affairs that somebody thinks is true. Like that's the easiest way to kind of define what a belief is. And when you get to these conversations again, like there's a lot of people that will not you can talk about beliefs, you can talk about knowledge, but when asked to define what these terms actually mean, people just they get hung up on this because it's one of those things that you could understand what in the context of what it means when you say believe, but you might not be able to explain it.
What it means is just you're taking
people hung up.
You're just taking an epistemic status toward a proposition. Sokka owns a blue car. I'm taking a stance on that, and I say, well, I believe that he owns a blue car. I think that proposition is true. That's why we relate things propositionally rather than psychologically, because we can't really test by argumentation any kind of psychological thing. If she, like Cheshire, holds a belief in her head, I can't. What am I going to test on that? But if it's a proposition, then we can actually theoretically test that by argumentation, and we can go look at the car too to see if it's blue, right? Something that's subjective. So when somebody says, I believe it is the case, they're just making a statement about ontology. They're just saying, this is what I think it to be the case. I believe, pretty much synonymous things. So you're not saying, I have Cartesian certainty that he bought a car today. No, you don't need Cartesian certainty. You don't need any kind of certainty. Knowledge doesn't require certainty. Knowledge only requires belief, that you believe it, that is true, and it's justified, in the most simplistic version of a theory of knowledge called justified true belief. But you don't have to have certainty.
Yeah, and that's a huge one as well. The certainty within as an ingredient of knowledge isn't required. You don't need
not in most theories. There's a strong belief case.
If you're a verificationist, then sure, let's go for it. But in most cases, like most people wouldn't subscribe to verificationism
because self-refuting.
Yeah, you would never know anything.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It's silly. So like certitude or like just certainty in general just isn't required. It isn't a required ingredient for knowledge. Well, it's true that if you make a knowledge claim about something, that you are expressing some level of certainty in this, but that's going to be based off of the other factors, like the justifications and stuff for this. The certainty alone isn't what makes something knowledge. So, which is really funny when because you hear these discussions all the time when people say things like, "Well, I'm an agnostic atheist," like I don't believe gods exist, but I don't know for sure. Wait, what? Like, who cares if you don't know for sure?
Yeah, I don't get that either.
Like,
I don't understand that.
Yeah, so because when you ever hear somebody like describing agnosticism as something, they say, "Well, I'm agnostic on that because I don't know for sure."
Yeah,
I don't express the level of certainty on that.
Telling you, people say that because the person comes back and says that you're claiming absolute knowledge.
That's why they're wrong. Say that. Well, but then you just look at them and you say, "Well, you need to go learn about epistemology, dude," because that's not what it's saying. They're just trying to play a game with you at that point.
Yeah, they got me, I guess.
And by the way, I'm gonna be making a video. My next video is probably gonna be on that topic of Gnostic atheism. Hope you guys liked the last 2 videos. I'm trying to get a little better, but the last one got well received. I had Stephen Hoyt review it for logical errors. He said it was fine. And so the amount of people watching my last video that liked it, thank you very much for that. I think that's a lot. I have a lot of people going, "God, that actually makes sense to me now. I get it." And that's what I want to hear. I want to hear people say, "I understand it." They don't have to be convinced by it as far as that they want to change their entire worldview or to go, "Oh, well, yeah, Steve's right on everything." But they go, "Oh, you know what? This made me think." That's the point of these videos.
There's a big difference between like just general what people's goals are. So like if you get something like the Atheist Experience, their goal is to have this conversation and allow, and like what Sokka said, because I agree with him, to point out the logical flaws in the dogmatic, in most dogmatic religions, and in religions in general.
Yeah.
Which is a fine goal. There's nothing wrong with that goal. Some of the tactics I don't agree with, but the goal is totally fine. Steve's goal is education.
Yeah.
When they use tactics that shit on education, that's where you're going to get, that's where the contention is.
Yeah, my goal is just people understand and make their own decisions by an informed choice. When they're telling people that what I'm putting out is incorrect, that's where the hackles on my neck come up, right? That's when I go, wait a minute here. If you're going to make that claim, I need to have evidence. Do you know how people have actually cited me a paper showing that I was wrong? 0. Do you know how people even bother to even know what a paper is that they've read? Very, very few, if any. And then when they cite something to me, it's like every paper ever put to me in the last year or two, in the few times it has, I can count them on a hand or two, I've already read the paper. So I've already familiarized what's in it, right? So they're not giving me any information that I've never seen before, I'm not familiar with, but they're reading things incorrectly. And the reason why they're reading things incorrectly is because they don't have the basic understanding to read things in context. And it's not one of those things by a theist saying, well, you're just reading it out of context. No, it is, if you go to these colleges and you take these courses and you want to understand a paper, you will be reading it in a specific way, in a context. Same with biology, right? It's just how it is. And so there is a specific way to read these things. I'm learning how to read it properly. Other people have learned how to read it properly. But if you have never even read these papers, then you cannot say that I'm wrong about these things because you're not familiar with how these things are expressed in the literature. You're just not at that point.
Has anyone actually ever gone out and linked you to the presumption of atheism?
Yeah, multiple times. I haven't read that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've read it several times. I've read a lot of the replies to it as well.
I've read it multiple times. I've read the first half of it multiple times because the second half is kind of irrelevant to me. But the first half is what most people will try to argue. Yeah.
And I love the fact that even to this day, you can still find papers put out every single year with people offering their own replies, or their own responses or reputations of that paper. So it's
there's some
great.
good ones too. That just Burgess Jackson has one that just annihilates that paper.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
Yeah,
but I think that when it comes to when people go out there and they start pushing the kind of the psychological state of atheism, and not just saying that the psychological state of atheism is the best way to define it or anything like that. No, more like that the idea that because the theists have had the opportunity to make their arguments and you remain unconvinced is a justification, therefore, for adopting a label like that. I think that I would really like to, maybe break down that paper one day, sit down and actually, this entire idea of atheism is psychologically.
Done. Matter of fact, some of the quotes out of that paper are pretty interesting because Anthony Flew himself said, as something I'm going to paraphrase, but as something along the lines of, as commonly understood, atheism is the belief that God does not exist. I want to change that and make it into somebody who doesn't believe that God exists. And so when people say,
Yeah.
well, Steve's trying to change definitions or usages or understandings, no. These are narratives put out by people since 1972, when the first book was kind of written on this by a guy named George Smith, Dr. George Smith. He wrote a book called A Case Against God. It was a horrible, horrible book. It didn't get much traction. But he started that then. Anthony Flew in 1972, then Smith in 74, and then American Atheists kind of picked it up with David Silverman. They're the ones that have an agenda to say we want atheism to be merely the belief that God, merely somebody who doesn't believe that God doesn't exist because they want it to be atheism as somebody who merely does not believe that God exists. And the reason for that is what Cheshire said, for political reasons, political expediency, and to get more political power.
I mean, and it's not like they don't make that clear.
They do.
They make it.
They do get it.
Oh no,
That's one of
David
the reasons
Silverman
why
has
I'm
said that.
Right, but why do I
Yeah,
get people
exactly.
telling me they say I swear to God, every so often I get, Steve, you're just being conspiratorial.
And that's like I don't have a problem.
Kidding me?
Yeah, well, that's why I don't have a problem with them doing it, because they make it. If they didn't make it clear, then it would be kind of
No,
underhanded,
I
and
get that.
would
I
be a
get that.
problem.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the issue is that they're telling people they're wrong when they aren't.
Hey guys,
It's not that
The issue
difficult
I
of an
have,
issue.
like, when it comes down to the whole kind of discussion, is that there is some truth to the sense that a word can be is defined by words are defined by their usages. Okay, and if that the majority of people have decided. Now, by the way, first off, there's 4 really good myths that people put out there. One that a theist has always meant without God. And that if you actually take a look at the etymology of the word, that it's always meant the simply without belief definition. That's not true. That the majority of people, or sorry, what's the other one? That throughout history, this is how it's always been used. That's wrong. I think what's the other one? I can't remember. But then the one I want to address which is that the majority of people use atheism this way, which is completely wrong as well. I mean, because you can take a look at any Gallup poll or any poll that's put out there, that's kind of charting the religious landscape of whatever country you're in, and you're going to see that atheism, people that recognize as atheists, is always going to be a smaller fraction of the group compared to the people that take positions of agnosticism or like no religious affiliation. And if it was the case that someone without a lack of, with just merely like a lack of belief in God would somehow be considered atheist, and the majority of people agreed with this, then you would see represented in these polls as well that the group of people that would be atheists would be larger than the people using the other definitions for things like agnosticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole point is they're trying to change that. I think that's the
Yeah.
entire point, is they're trying to get more people to
Right, and I'm pushing back on that though, John, and that's why they're
Which is dogmatic.
and that is why they're against
I
me.
agree.
That is
No,
why
but
they
they-
go against me personally, because they have their agenda, and I
It's
think they're doing.
inconvenient to the narrative.
It is inconvenient, and I think that they do it dishonestly in some cases. Now, I do agree with Chesh. The fact that they say it's political, I get that, and I respect them for that. However, when they're trying to put out the information that I am incorrect, that I am somehow misleading people, and I'm causing schisms, and I'm somebody who should be avoided because what the fuck does Steve know? Who the fuck is Steve? That to me is where the dishonesty comes in, because I got to tell you, I may not be by any means an expert on any of these topics. I am a somewhat well-educated layman in this regard, but I do hang around very smart people, and if I mess up, I guarantee it, I get a message the next day, "Hey Steve, you fucked up, you screwed the pooch, you're an idiot, blah blah," and they would fix me. It happens.
The
It
problem-
happens.
And the other funny thing is that this isn't a new thing either. Like,
No.
like I took this position of the definite, but I used to argue the same thing Steve argues before Steve actually accepted this position, because I think when you first came to the community, you were of
It was about
the
the-
mind.
No. I never was in that mindset. No, I never accepted the lack thing, but I didn't know how to articulate it as well until I listened to other people, Ozzy and a few other people. I think you.
Yeah.
And we're only talking about months differences, though. Months, if at most, because you were on things like NGC Studios, The Place, and were you on the Line
Yeah.
Ghost?
Not the Line Go show, but like
Magic Sandwich.
this for me, yeah. Like, this goes back about 8 years,
Yeah.
7 or 8 years.
And I go back
yeah,
about
back-
6 maybe,
Well,
so I don't know.
part-
Maybe
Yeah,
it's longer.
and I got these arguments. Like, I was corrected on this because when I first came to the community, I thought the same way, where it was that lack of belief definition, and I was corrected on this by people who again you could just see this go back, and it used to be a joke that there was things that would cycle annually, like that. It was almost like a change of seasons. Is that the same arguments would come back? Precept would come back for a little bit, and then get pushed away and it would disappear. And then all of a sudden, the definition of atheism would come back for a little bit. That conversation would go on for a couple months, and then it would get pushed away. And then it was all religious people have a mental illness. And
oh God, that was when that one popped back up. That was that one fucker. What was his name?
Forbidden Fruit.
Forbidden Fruit. Thank you. Oh wow, did he get some? He got wrecked. He got ran off the internet for his bad arguments.
Yeah, people. Yeah.
So part of the thing that makes it just straight. Part of the thing that makes it dishonest is that if Matt knows these arguments, like he claims he knows these arguments, then when he says people know you're wrong, then he's lying to them, and he knows he's lying if that is the case. Now, if he just doesn't know what the arguments are, that's fine. But if he says he does, and he actually does, and says people are wrong, then he's lying. Now, it would be fine if he said, sure, but that's not how we're defining it here. That would be fine. There would be no problem. That wouldn't be lying. Well, that would just be saying, we aren't currently using those definitions. But when he says, no, you're wrong, then if he knows that these are what the arguments are, then he is lying.
Well, I don't think that he's lying. I think that what it is like I said, like this stuff used to come up like every once in a while.
How is he not lying? Please.
Sure. Thank you. I'll get to that.
I love you guys bickering. I do.
But because when Steve, like I said, like this stuff used to come up occasionally, and that was it. Steve's planted his flag firmly in this. He's not letting this go away, and because of this, he's become like a lot of people see Steve as like the atheist definition guy. And generally, when you have somebody that's like really strong representing this position, like Steve trying to kind of correct some of the misconceptions that people have over this gets mistaken for him advocating for one position as right, over another. And I think that that's the problem, is that we're so used to these conversations coming out where you have one group of people saying, this is the way to do it. One group of way of doing. Oh, sorry. 1 second.
All right. Yeah. Real quick, Michael, I know you wanted to get in here. And so, by the way, I'm very sorry, Reds. Reds loves this topic. It's like his favorite topic. And he did. I won't let him in.
Eat the biggest dick.
Oh, he did sneak in.
No, it's okay. Actually, he can have my spot. I work crazy early. I got to tap out, unfortunately.
Have a good night.
Hey, by the way, promote your podcast, and we got some people on that for you, man. Yeah.
Okay. So. Yeah. So basically, the podcast is The Canadian Atheist. You can just search that on any podcast catcher that you use. I don't. My partner and I, Dean, we don't monetize the show in any way. So anybody who's looking to support anything, just give the money to Steve.
I know I liked you for a reason, but that's not necessarily. But I like your podcast. This is funny when people say that I'm against atheist groups. I support your podcast. I support Atheist Edge. I support Fully Deconverted. There's a lot of atheist groups I fully support because they're honest about how they go about things. That's what I look for.
Yeah. So and Steve, I'll reach out to you. We'll get you and Chesh and everybody onto the show.
She would like that. When
once
I would love that.
Yeah, once the studio's all fixed up, we had, like I said, we had a flood in our house, so
that's not good.
It's fine. Insurance take care of it, but we're just kind of.
I had that happen once. They paid for it too. Jess, have you been on a podcast before?
Just ridiculous.
No, not just a straight.
You could
podcast.
be her first. There you go.
Okay, cherry popping.
Pop in that podcast, cherry.
All right.
Hi, bud.
Well, listen,
good seeing you, bud.
Steve. Thanks for having me on, and we'll talk to you guys soon. And enjoy the rest of the show.
Sweet, thank you.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Hi, Reds. Don't worry, we're gonna be moving on to other stuff here, Reds. That we've kind of ran the course of this. But John, do you anything want to add on this before we kind of wrap it up, and then maybe kind of do a little I don't know, after coitus stuff?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess just one thing I'd mention, going back to what Sokka said about kind of splitting the difference between lying and not lying. I mean, something that I noticed was, I think on one of the episodes, Matt specifically said something about, someone brought up the definition of atheism or something, and Matt said, well, I was going to have a discussion with Steve about that. And then he kind of said, well, that's not going to happen.
For obvious reasons, but I don't know what those reasons are.
Oh, that's right. He said for obvious reasons.
I don't
or
no
something
idea.
Like that.
Honest to God, I have no idea what his reasons are.
And
But I
then,
won't
you
now
know,
anyways. I think it's not worth it.
Well,
I
that's
know
my
it's
issue
not
with
worth
the
it.
lying bit. It's only lying if he, one, actually does understand the arguments like he claims he does, and tells people you're wrong without
That's the
context.
problem. I think, okay, Aaron doesn't understand the
Sorry,
arguments.
maybe I can finish my
yes,
thought on. Sorry about
of
this.
course.
I got to interrupt my
Yes.
neighbor there for a second
Yes.
too. I think that, like I said, Steve's planted his his flag on the ground on this and this kind of firm position, and I agree with Steve's position. I agree with what he's saying, but it's because it's popped up so many times, people just assume that Steve is arguing for that his usage should be out there, and you see that's the number one thing that people will challenge Steve on, is that they think that Steve is telling people that they should use it this way. And Steve doesn't. Steve said, well, you can use it either way. I have my own personal reasons for using it this way. I think that this is, if
I'll push back a little bit. I mean, I do argue that I think they should I think it's a better way to go, but I think you're arguing a little bit different. I'm not mandating they do. I'm not prescriptively telling them they need to. I'm just saying I think that it's a better way to go.
Telling people that they're wrong when they say things like, that, well, it's always been used this way. Well, no, that's wrong.
True. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, this is what the word, if you take a look at the etymology of the word, this is what it means. Well, that's not true either.
Well, that's not the kind of lying I'm talking about, though.
But what I'm saying is that when Steve tells you that's wrong there, people will misinterpret what he's saying. They'll think that he's advocating for all the stuff on the other position.
Can you explain?
I don't think that.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Finish.
No, so I don't think that it's that necessarily that they're lying. I really honestly think it's just because they've fallen into defense mode. They've fallen into defense mode where they think that someone's coming around prescribing how they should use a word, and all they're doing is pushing back, saying, no, I like my way, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Well, which is
that's
fine,
wrong.
but that's not what I was talking about. That's not the example that I gave, and that wasn't what I was
That would
reasoning.
make it so they're not
on
lying.
top of it,
Yeah, I don't think they're lying.
not in the example I gave. And on top of that, especially when you're talking about somebody like Matt Dillahunty and people who are going to address Steve by name, is it or is it not at least dishonest to have not looked at their argument directly if they're going to fight about it?
Yeah, and let me ask you this: could you explain? Can you really quick explain? What I'm doing is not prescriptivism by any stretch of imagination. First of all, the prescriptivism is actually a term used in moral ontology when you're talking about somebody who is a moral non-cognitivist, and you're saying that a proposition such as stealing is wrong is a directive. Don't steal. That's prescriptivism. But when you're using it as far as just say prescriptivism over descriptivism as a dictionary, I do not say these words have prescribed meanings. I am the anti-prescriptivist, actually. I'm telling you that they do not have intrinsic meanings. It is the groups like American Atheists, Aaron and Matt, who have gone out and said, no, these words have one meaning. Steve has wrong. I've had Aaron actually say this. This is the correct meaning in his way of saying it, and everything else is theistically influenced and is incorrect. He's actually said that. That
Steve,
would be prescriptivism in the way that they refine.
How many years?
That's the irony of it, where a lot of the stuff that they will, and I fell into this too, all the time. Ozzy's fallen into this. You take a look at his videos on the topic, that when you merely come out there and say, listen, there's this word here. I think that this word has more utility. This is the way that it's classically understood. Yada yada yada. And then people come out and say, how dare you tell me how to use this word?
Which
it
drives me nuts because that's not what's happening. But Matt Dillahunty has gone on other shows and said, well, Steve's prescriptivist and Steve's telling people how to use these words. No, I'm not, Matt. And I wish you would stop saying that, because anybody who's ever watched my show has never heard me say this is how you have to use these words. No, that's stupid. Yes,
you fall into the pattern.
Sorry.
When someone says
this is a bullshit excuse, Sokka.
God
this
damn
is
it.
just an excuse.
They're like, no.
What,
Steve.
Yes.
No.
Why won't you just accept my solution? I've been telling you the solution for years. I will tell you my position. You find the word for it, and we'll just stick with it for the remainder of the discussion.
I'm cool
that way
with
we
that.
can actually have a fucking discussion
that-
instead of arguing over semantics.
It's not it's not semantics. I hear that word semantics, and it's like, this is not semantics. It's not over meanings. It's over usages and logic, because they're saying my logic is wrong too. That's not semantics. There is semantics in logic. Don't get me wrong. But we're not talking about meanings of words. We're talking. They're saying that literally my logic is incorrect, and I've had them tell me that. I was like, no, it's not. Stop.
I've said
describe your position, and they will find the word for it. Let them have their own.
That's why I say, when people ask what I am, I say I'm a potato atheist. Because at least at that point in time, I have to explain myself.
Pretty much.
But and then the Cheshire, I can't remember who said it. It was like, don't ascribe to malice what can be written off as stupidity.
Mm-hmm. No, don't ascribe to malice, which should be written off.
I didn't say they were being malicious. I specifically said I don't think they are being malicious. I specifically said I don't think that they are.
And charitable.
Well, I try to be charitable. That's the idea.
I see.
If there's one thing that the conversation can benefit more from, it's a little bit more charity.
Oh yeah, I don't get any charity from Matt or from Aaron.
Fuck you, Steve. I'm talking with John. No, sorry.
They really don't give me any charity.
Josh.
Like Cheshire said, they don't come to me and ask me for clarification, and they just assume that I'm wrong by fiat.
I think it's an inconvenience thing.
You're dealing with people that offer reputations of arguments based on hearing them before in the past, right? These guys, you get this when you engage into counter apologetics, that you get the same arguments over and over again. I don't really need your formulation of the ontological argument to start offering a refutation of it. I know what you're talking about already, and I think that they take the same position with you. I don't need to actually listen to what Steve's saying to offer a refutation for it. And I think that maybe that could be where the they probably should.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to leave it with this, and then Red's, anything I add to it. He says, CC Sleeper says, there's a subtle difference between telling peace how to use a word and how a word is used. I agree. Thank you. I tell people how these words are used in the literature. I tell people how I think it makes more sense to use more precise language on this particular topic. The other things you could use more colloquial, and it makes sense to do so. It's not one size fits all. But when they're telling me that agnostic deals with knowledge and nothing else, and Steve doesn't know what agnosticism is, and all this other bullshit, that's when I throw down the bullshit card and go, look, you guys have a very basic understanding, and yet you don't understand it well enough to actually explain it to anybody in any cogent manner. I think that I at least do, and I think my videos have explained to people that being agnostic has fuck all to do with knowledge in this particular case. It has to do with belief. It is a belief position. It's a second order belief position. So when they say,
I don't have a title. I don't adopt any one label. I'll describe my position, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And if you say, look, I don't believe. Let's say I bought a car today, and you say, well, I don't have a position on that either way. I don't believe either way. I would say, well, are you okay with saying that you're agnostic on the proposition? If he says yes, then boom, we move on. Game over. Fun for the entire family. Where do you want to go with that? I don't see an issue.
I usually just deal with whatever claim is coming at me at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Be like, hey, Red, what's your position? I don't know whether God does or does not exist.
Doggy.
My only reverse cowgirl, by the way. You should know this by now. Secondly, it would
pictures
be,
or it didn't happen.
My only position is that your arguments for God's existence suck ass. Find a word to describe it.
I thought it was the what's your position? I'm an asshole. Don't need much more.
That's the only position I actually have. I'm an asshole.
You can't be an asshole. You're Canadian.
It's illegal.
I'm not. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I'm also a Canadian, so.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
So if you want to see a hockey fight between me and Cheshire, fuck.
Bring it. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Fuck bud. Oh, fuck boy.
I want to see you check her. Put her in check. So yeah, look, so I'm going to be doing a video eventually on Gnostic atheist, because I just find it to be a weird statement, and I think the people that use terms like agnostic atheist just don't really understand the topic very well, and because it just makes no sense to me. But they're allowed to use it. I'm not saying that they can't. But if you go to an epistemologist and you say things, I'm like, when they say, well, what's your position on the ontology of God? Does God exist? You say, well, I'm an agnostic atheist. They're going to look at you like you're batshit insane, because that has nothing to do with ontology when you start throwing epistemology. When you ask somebody, what is your stance on the existence of God? They don't give a shit whether you have an epistemic modifier. They just want to know: do you believe God exists? Do you believe God does not exist, or do you believe no neither? That's what they want. They don't give a crap about agnostic, atheist. That's not how these words are used that way. So I'll be doing a video on that, hopefully to explain all that, because even Matt Dillahunty says that agnostic atheism, in the weak case, meaning as a lack of belief, is absolutely nonsensical. He doesn't use it any longer. He even says, and even on Iron Chariots, he doesn't agree with it. So it's not just me. There's a lot of people that.
Hey, wait a minute. If
What?
they're just lazy and don't know what the position is, then why is Matt Dillahunty saying he understands what the position is? You just shifted the lie to a different place.
I think Matt Dillahunty does understand these
minute.
things. I was gonna say Aaron, I don't think understands any of it. So
No,
I think Matt
that's what
does.
Saka
But
was
I don't
saying.
know. Well, let me finish. This is what I brought up. I think Matt does understand these things, but I think he has some kind of cognitive dissonance where I wouldn't call it a lie. I think that he understands it, but he has such an agenda-driven thing that he actually thinks he's putting out the truth, which in case it's not
I
a
just
lie.
I should probably specify. When I say lie, I mean more along like Aaron's definition of lying.
Yeah, well, Aaron's not lying because
Not that I necessarily prescribe to that, but I mean if we're going to go by their standards.
Yeah, well, I don't go by
and their
standards.
definitions.
Yeah, I don't go by their definitions either. And Aaron, like I said, Aaron says, well, Steve accused me of lying. No, I could just be intellectually dishonest sometimes, but that's not the same as lying. I don't think Aaron's a liar. I think he's a very honest person. He's just fundamentally wrong, and that comes across as being, well, disingenuous when
That's why I'm
when the
being
logic
very
shows he's wrong.
specific.
Yeah.
That's why I'm being very specific about my example.
I get you.
I don't think Matt Dillahunty is a liar. I'm saying if these are the circumstances, then these are the conclusions based on this, this, and this.
You're like
I'm
my
not saying
attack bull,
that he's
aren't
a
you?
liar. I'm not saying that he is lying. I'm not saying it's malicious. I'm saying that given these very specific circumstances,
All right.
this would be.
All right. Well, I'm not
I
going
just
to go
wanna
that far.
specify.
Yeah. But we're not. Yeah, like I said, I got nothing against the person. I don't think they're lying. I just think that they need to go actually take a course in these topics. That's all. Cajun castration, $2. He's an echo. Echo. One last question. Steve, is your position for agnosticism a justification for personal experience, or is it based on evidence? Experience. I'm not an evidentialist. I think that people can have beliefs and positions not based upon evidence, because I reject Clifford's principle. I think there's pragmatic reasons to do things and also prudential reasons to do things. And I think evidentialism is about 100 and some odd years out of date. And if you think that's weird for me to say, go look at what evidentialism actually is, and you probably end up agreeing with me. I don't think that we have to visually see everything. I don't think we have to, like logical positivism, I don't think it makes sense to say we only can say that something is the case if it's logically determined. That's not how we build an epistemological framework.
I think that I miss those days that like creating a hangout and we should just discuss Clifford's principle. Like,
I like the Clifford's principle. I mean, I know the story very well, actually. And while I think that he had good intent, I think that his overall epistemological position on it was malformed. I think there are reasons why people can be justified to hold a particular belief because, like I said, of potential reasons. But if you have a belief that is unjustified and you don't act upon it or act upon it inappropriately, are you morally culpable? That's what Clifford was talking about. What is the moral culpability of somebody? That's what I find to be intriguing about moral.
I love the amalgamation of like a moral question regarding knowledge is great.
Yeah, and I'll save Clifford's principle for another time. If people don't know what it is, they can look it up. But we might have a discussion on that one day because it's an interesting story behind. Actually, believe it or not, I don't know if you knew this, but I think he actually was on a ship that sank.
Oh no, yeah, he actually did survive.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
which is why he uses that as a strong example for his argument.
That's what I thought. I thought it was actually based on something that actually happened to him. All right, guys, thanks for this. We're gonna like end this now. I like these little round tables. People pick a topic. John came in. I know he probably didn't get a chance to ask a lot of questions, but I'm sure he'll be back. But I hope, John, did we at least kind of suss it out a little bit for you?
Absolutely, and I am just thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for letting me come on and hang out with you guys.
Well, you're welcome every time. We're going to be doing the round tables like once a week. Chester and I have morning things on Monday that we're going to be doing. We have Rum and Coke Night on Saturdays, which are open. And then in the week, we've got things like Dr. Hugh Ross is coming on next week. We got Dr. Fozrana coming on. We got Dr. Misha Griffith coming on. We have science people coming on. So we will try to get back into the main swing of things because my channel is science and it is philosophy as well. So hang in there. I know people have unsubscribed only because we've been talking about this kind of stuff, but this is what's been topical lately. I mean, Aaron just made a blog about me. Matt
Yeah.
Dillahunty's throwing my name out there. If they're
Yeah,
gonna do
they-
that, I'm every so
they
often.
brought
I'm
it
gonna-
up.
Yeah, I mean,
Same reason why we talked about Katie today,
Is-
because
oh.
she brought it up.
tell them about that real quick.
Oh, Katie thinks that there's a bunch of people all in cahoots to, I don't know, screw over her business, I guess, and
Oh,
that they're
she's
all
paranoid.
revolving around Steve. It's super paranoia, and it's bizarre.
The person who made that account, the Without a Crystal Balls account, I don't know who they are, but they messaged me. They said, I don't know.
Without any crystal balls.
Without any crystal balls. They said, I don't know if she's paranoid or if she's just
I think she's projecting.
what's the word he used here? Narcissistic.
There's no collusion.
Because she has made these most outlandish statements, and it's just like, are you kidding me? She took a screenshot of somebody who had a crystal ball with a gun on it, and she's like, is that a threat? And we're like, are you really going to take that as a threat?
Like, the
Come
thing
on,
is like,
man.
her whole video is just a whole lot of her talking and not showing a damn thing.
And she refuses. She's like, well, I don't have to show evidence. This isn't a court of law. The fuck? It may not be a court of law, but you're going
Then
to
why
accuse
will
me?
fine, then we're just not gonna believe or listen to you because it's not a court of law and you're not making a case.
Reds,
so
Reds.
shut up.
Do you know what her? Do you know? I found out today, or maybe it was yesterday. Do you know what her argument was of why she thinks I was sexually harassing her? Okay, first of all, do you have duct tape? Wrap it.
And also an oven mitt, yeah.
Yeah, wrap it around your head. It's going to get really messy. Her reasoning was because I have a particular stance on rape culture that she never asked my nuanced position on. You know, it's a complex topic, right? Because I was talking about rape culture and how I think it's a lot blown out of proportion. Somehow, in her mind, that translated to, quote, sexual harassment.
So anyway, are you going to invite me out for coffee in an elevator?
Oh, is that elevator gate? is that a reference to elevator gate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nick makes a good point.
Yeah,
So while people arguing against her don't need evidence either, I presume.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think Reds knew about elevator gate. That's a while ago.
Yeah, I did.
What is elevator gate? I don't know what that is.
That was with
Some-
Christine, or with Watson. What's her name? Rebecca Watson.
Yeah. Rebecca Watson got approached by some person in an elevator and apparently was like, "Oh, don't do this, don't do that. I'm a girl."
Somebody had asked her. They said they really liked her speech and said, don't take it the wrong way, but do you want to come have coffee in my room? She took that as, oh my God, this guy's trying to rape me. That's called elevator gate.
I don't
So
know if
she
you know
did
this,
the
but
exact
if you're
opposite. So she
raping
did the
somebody
exact
you don't
opposite
ask-
and took it in the wrong way, is what you're saying.
Yeah, instead of
Well-
saying no, thank you, I politely don't. She made it into a spectacle, divided the community for a very long time because you had the SJWs going, it was so wrong for somebody to ask them to their room, and the other people going, so the fuck what? Is the guy saying, you want to have a coffee? Big fucking deal.
I mean, it's kind of awkward to invite somebody to your room instead of just to the cafe or whatever. Like,
Be
awkward,
that as
not
may.
rapey.
Be
Just
that
awkward.
yeah, be that
But you
as
can
it
make an
may.
offer, right?
Yeah,
is-
and that's the other thing.
That's a whole different level than
There's-
rapey. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, exactly. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, there's still not. That's not a. Anyway, the whole point of rape is that you either didn't ask or ignored the answer. Did this guy do either?
No, he was fine about it. He didn't pressure her at all.
Then
He
no.
was fine. He kind of just.
Jesus.
He
She
basically
made
just said, "Okay, rejected," and walked the fuck away.
yeah,
Yeah, this
she
is
made it
not-
into a big issue. This is what I see these people doing. This is what
Seems
Katie.
like the most obvious
she
thing ever.
Yeah, I mean, she took what I was talking about, a completely different context, to her to say, well, Steve must believe that I didn't actually get raped then. How the fuck do you get that?
Wait, hold on a second. Somebody in the chat is saying that the person that asked her to coffee was Louis C.K.
No, it wasn't.
Uh-oh.
No, it wasn't Louis C.K. No, it wasn't Louis C.K.
No.
It's a totally different story
okay.
then.
Yeah, totally different
Well,
story.
not necessarily, because he still could have not done anything inappropriate
No,
in
this
that
was
situation.
during
Right.
MythCon. Yeah, but anyways,
Okay.
long story on
Sounds
that.
like a joke to me.
Yeah, it was a joke.
I
But anyways,
like our new guy.
yeah, is it? Yeah, can we keep him?
Oh, I would love to be kept.
Okay.
Only if you feed him and bathe him regularly.
And yeah, and leave the women for us, because you got
Right.
that baby face, and we're highly
Right.
protective of them.
That's fine. I'm married. She'd kill me.
Oh, even better. I'm hoping to either marry or gay, so you're safe, or both. That's fine too. You know.
That's yeah, it's good. It's good. We don't judge.
We don't judge. No. It's so funny too. This channel has more diversity than half the channels out there, and I get people complaining about I'm not diverse enough or I'm just this or that. I'm like, really?
It's because you don't toe the line as hard as they want you to.
Yeah,
Oh,
didn't
my
you
God.
know I'm a boy? There's too many boys here.
Yeah. Fun fact: Cheshire is not what she appears to be. We'll let you just figure that out.
I found that out the
There's
hard
no-
way,
if
guys.
you're not- if
The
you're
hard
not
way.
familiar-
Literally the hard way.
I found out the hard way. Yes,
It's
it
okay.
was
I
very.
don't judge.
Yeah. You
We-
know what?
love
Honestly,
you,
honestly,
Josh.
with me, I really don't care. Like, people can identify however they want, right?
I mean,
You know, I'm
let
pretty
me-
progressive that way.
No, it's other people identifying me.
let me
Right.
let
Exactly.
me just
Passed
say,
so well.
I was
Poorly.
as surprised about Cheshire as I was when I got into bed with Sokka the first time a few years ago.
Oh, that didn't surprise me at all.
Oh, man.
I expected disappointment.
I mean, I didn't expect it to be made out of an actual sock, but okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I see a lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, I am 100% crocheted.
Yeah. This has gone so south. Okay.
Sokka is a lovely weave.
You
and anybody who
invited.
says otherwise.
I know what I get myself into when I have Reds come into a Skype call. All right, John, thanks for joining us, man. And you're now part of the community, I guess. So come around more often.
It's a dream come true.
Sweet, and I'm
I
really
already told
appreciative.
my mom.
Yeah, tell your mom. My
did.
mom still knows the hell I do. But thanks for people watching this. I know I'm going to get comments going, Steve's beating the dead horse. I know trolls are going to come around. They always do. I just don't bother with any of those people. So if you don't like that content, I get it. Don't watch. But the people that are learning from these things and are actually want to help push back on bad epistemology, bad science, bad philosophy, just misinformation in general, here you go. I'm
Is
here
your
for
mom
that.
watching?
Hi, Mom. Hi, John's mom.
I don't think she's watching. She probably doesn't know how to use YouTube, but I'm gonna send her a link and then she'll
Okay.
watch later.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh yeah, if you guys say hi to her, that's great.
Yeah, we'll
I-
get rid of Nick and we'll
told,
put you in for him. But sorry, Nick.
I told my mom I was on the stream. She replied with, "I'm adopted."
Yeah, she's like, Reds who?
Exactly.
All right, guys, we're gonna do the lead out here, and by the way, it'll be hot mic. But here we go. Anyways, that was fun, guys. Hot mics. Don't say anything inappropriate like about your little wart condition there. We'll get that fixed. Medicine does amazing things for genital warts nowadays.
Balls, said the queen. If I had them, I'd be king.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.